Hello, everyone. So today our group is going to be talking about the research question we came up with for this project, with the overarching theme of cockroach collaboration and understanding, does teamwork really make the dream work? Now, when we were coming up with our preliminary idea, we looked at the different literature that exists for the species Blaberus discoidalis, so the discoid cockroaches we'll be looking at in this study. And we saw this very large gap in any sort of literature that exists regarding social structures and especially like collaboration within the species. Now, there was two pieces of literature that really stuck out to us and helped us formulate our question and later our hypothesis. One was by Legendaire, and what this study did is they looked at different species and types of cockroaches, but they all fell under the Blaberidae family. And they ultimately, what came from the study is they determined that like recognizes like. So cockroaches that came from the same species were able to determine that, like, understand that they looked like one another and were more likely to interact with one another on a morphological level. They were able to recognize that. And so that's something that we wanted to keep in mind when we started coming up with an experiment, is recognizing that all these species of discoid roaches that we have available, not only are they the same species, but they have been cohabitating in the same environment in their little bins that they have. So that was something to kind of keep in mind. Now, what the second study that I have listed, which is by Halfman, provided for us was this really cool insight on the genus Blaberus. So they looked at a different species of cockroach. So there's an assumption there that the same genus of cockroaches would be able to kind of follow the conclusions they made. But what they ultimately found was that these cockroaches were able to understand that there was an audience watching them when they were performing a task versus when they weren't. And in fact, the level of task was impacted by the audience presence or not. So with a more simple task, the audience was beneficial for them, for the cockroach to complete the task. Whereas when they were doing something considered more difficult, the audience kind of hindered that. And so that was really interesting because we have these two studies here where one, the cockroaches are interacting with each other, but they're not necessarily motivated or driven to a specific common goal. Whereas with the second study, they have this sort of interaction aspect, but they're limited. They're not allowed to collaborate with one another. And it kind of gave us this idea, ultimately, that they may not be the most collaborative. We don't know that yet, but we do understand that they are influenced by their environment, which ultimately led us to this overarching objective we wanted to study, which was to explore whether or not discoid cockroaches are collaborative or individually driven in their behavior.
Here we will go over a few important concepts and terms that were discussed in several of the research studies we found. These are all extremely important in understanding the foundation of social behavior that is known in cockroaches and what we are looking to question in this experiment. So first, cockroaches are social creatures and they live among one another in groups. These groups are called an aggregation, meaning a cluster together. This is one aspect of their social behavior in action. Next is plasticity. In simple terms, plasticity is when something changes to better fit an environment. For organisms, they do this usually for optimal survival. Studies in the past have shown that cockroaches have been known to adapt based on social interactions. One study we found called the role of personality variation and plasticity in social facilitation and cockroach aggregation by researchers Isaac and Jean Lewis stated that some individuals show more behavioral plasticity than others when influenced by social interactions. The roaches also showed that consistency of behavior was maintained in a social condition, but not when the same individuals were tested alone, suggesting that individuals might vary in their social cohesion. This is something that we definitely want to test in our theory and in our future experiment. Next is something we are all familiar with, which is the concept of a social structure. Every species has their own kind of social structure. We don't have a lot of evidence to examine and identify what these cockroaches' social structure is, but there was a study that observed our species of cockroach to behave in a hierarchy, which is really interesting since we didn't know much about them before. The study raised a question wondering if other cockroaches would entrain the similar behavior to create a more efficient group. This is something we hope to experiment with our test as well. And lastly, there is a social facilitation. This basically means that when there isn't an audience, one may perform better or worse. We were able to find one study called Replicating Roaches, a pre-registered direct replication of Zoniak, Getter, and Herman's social facilitation study. So what they did is they basically did the same maze study that we were planning on doing, and they found that the cockroaches completed their maze quicker by themselves than when other roaches were present. So this is what leads us to our research question and hypotheses. So here are our research questions. We actually have two. The first one is, are discoid cockroaches a collaborative species, or are they more individually driven in navigation? And then the second one that we created kind of bounces off that one, which is, do discoid cockroaches perform better or worse in a group compared to individually? And would they assist each other when one is in distress? We have read that when another cockroach, say, is flipped over, the other ones help them. So we're going to try that as well in our experiment. And then based on what we know, we formed our hypothesis, which states cockroaches will be more efficient navigating as individuals and less efficient in group navigations. However, they will still assist one another when in distress. We just based this on our previous knowledge and the previous studies that have shown the cockroaches, even though they are social creatures, they do perform certain tasks individually.
So for our methods, we designed a maze for the cockroaches, and this maze is designed to test the intelligence, the memory, and sensory functions of the cockroaches. It has one correct escape path and three dead ends. The maze is built from cardboard mainly, maybe some plastics we may use, and obviously the maze involves 4 to 5 roaches. Um, the trials include the first trial would be each roach navigates the maze individually 3 times. The second trial is going to be roaches going through the maze as a group 3 times. And the third trial is going to be one roach being flipped on its back onto its wings to see if the others will assist it or even recognize that it's on its back and can't move. And also, the design is supposed to explore how roaches perform solo, individually, versus also in a group, and whether or not they can cooperate together to problem solve in these scenarios where they have to get out successfully through the right exit, the one exit. So there's going to be 4 to 5 roaches for every trial. There's going to be 3 trial runs, and this is just meant to test the intelligence, to demonstrate their ability to work together, to see if they have that, availability to do so. We want to test their sensory functions like their antennas and their limbs and their hearing, their visual. And we just want to test and see if they will work well together, if they'll work well or better solo versus together. Um, yeah.
So, a little bit more information on the methods behind our experiment. We're going to be collecting our data one day a week. We're going to do it later in the day once the sun begins to set. This is because discoid cockroaches are a nocturnal animal, and although they become active once they are disturbed by humans, we feel like we will get the most accurate and natural results if we go based on their internal clocks. Therefore, we think our results will be most accurate if conducted at night. We're measuring for 3 main variables within this experiment. The first is the independent performance of the discoid cockroaches. The second is the group performance and their collaborative efforts when one roach is flipped on their back in distress. And lastly, the time to successfully exit the maze. Because of the variables we were measuring, we feel that an ANOVA, an analysis of variance, is the best statistical test for our experiment. This is because an ANOVA compares the means across different groups. And since we have two main groups, the individual and the group performance, we'll be able to see which which environment was best for the roaches. So it can show us the differences between the performances to compare the groups, which will overall help us see which method was most effective for the discoid cockroaches, and also gives important insight on their social behavior and if they like to work in groups to get out of a problem or if they prefer to problem solve individually. And it will also see if they will help others when in sign of distress or if they have no care for the well-being of other roaches.
The broader implications. So what does this study really mean in the overall scheme of things? So, other than just, for curiosity's sakes, the results of this study will give some insight into this animal's social behavior. As we mentioned before, discoid cockroaches um, are not a lot is known about them. So this will be giving more knowledge to that. And depending on, I kind of got this idea from this paper, Crawl et al. Of 2015, where their cockroaches, it depended on their behavior if they were in a group or individually. They acted very different between those two. So, say that is our outcome when they're working in a team or individual. The predictability of their behavior will be more defined, and can aid in other research projects or even husbandry care, because also, as we learn, they're widely used in research, and knowing certain things pertaining their behavior can be really useful regarding husbandry, especially in a social aspect. For example, right now we're keeping all the cockroaches together, and it seems to be working. But on a larger scale, for research purposes, how do their social interactions affect each other? And this could help with research and also taking care of them. So yeah, those are the broader implications, and that's the end of our presentation. We have a couple resources at the end that we used. And thank you.